Today, we're testing over 25 11-speed drivers, like the new Drive and the Latitude 64 Grace, to see how they match up to the Innova Wraith. Why? Because the Wraith can fly like this. Today's video is sponsored by Disc Golf Swag. More about them a little later. Hey everyone, it's Greg from Six Sided Discs. Why don't more people throw the Wraith? Well, Greg, I'm glad you asked that question. Because of the Innova Destroyer. The Destroyer is one of the most popular discs in the history of our sport. While Innova's sponsored players like Calvin Heimberg have thrown the Destroyer as their go-to maximum distance driver for decades, the more important clue to its quality is that nearly every pro that throws an open bag chooses to use a Destroyer. There's no denying its greatness, but there was a short period of time from 2005 to 2007 when the Wraith reigned supreme. The Innova Wraith was approved in 2005, and they describe it as the original wide-rimmed distance driver, which might be a clue to how and why we ended up with the Destroyer in the first place. You see, the Wraith is a more forgiving and controllable disc than your average Destroyer, making it much better for amateurs, lower arm speeds, or even tailwind drives, when a Destroyer might be too overstable. So I ask again, why don't more people throw the Wraith? Well, as it turns out, they do. And with good reason. One of our subscribers, Zach, put the Wraith through its paces in a couple different plastics for us. His DX Wraith was really flippy, turning aggressively, hitting the ground around 280 feet, and rolling straight to almost 500 on this finely cut surface. While his seasoned beat-in Star Wraith, thrown flat and hard, gets a smooth turn before a late but reliable fade. And demonstrating the wide variety of stabilities, his new Halo Wraith is super overstable. On the same angle as the Star Wraith, it just fades out aggressively. Thanks again to Zach for sending in those clips. If you'd like to be featured in one of our future videos, follow us on social media or join our Discord at the link in the description. Zach isn't the only one out there enjoying his Wraiths. While the excitement and buzz of every new Destroyer release makes all the headlines, the Wraith is quietly the best-selling disc of all time at Infinite Discs. For whatever reason, it doesn't quite get the attention it deserves, but maybe it would if it had some beautiful custom artwork like this from today's sponsor, Disc Golf Swag. Flight numbers may not always matter, but as the saying goes, pretty discs fly further. Maybe that's something we should test in the future. With Disc Golf Swag, you can get any image printed onto select discs. Their prints have excellent detail and are durable and fade resistant. With a limited stock of Discraft, Innova, and MVP, there's some great discs to choose from. You can upload any image on their website and get an instant proof of how it would look on your disc, fast shipping, and no minimums. You can learn more at discgolfswag.com or at the link in the video description, and a huge thanks to Disc Golf Swag for supporting our channel. Now, back to the Wraith. We'll be throwing this pretty Wraith and all the rest of these discs in central Ohio, around 800 feet of elevation, and the conditions today were a toasty 88 degrees Fahrenheit, very humid, and a slight 5 to 10 mile per hour tailwind. Remember, in a tailwind, discs are going to get a little less glide and typically fly a little bit more overstable. Now again, the ideal Wraith flight in calm conditions should look something like this. A slight drift to the right, but a reliable fade for easy distance. And we have 3 different Wraiths to throw today, beginning with our custom printed Star Wraith. This Star Wraith is max weight around 175 grams and has just a slight dome. And in today's tailwind, it had quite a bit of overstability. But to show what a little bit of use can do for a Wraith, we have a slightly beat-in Star Wraith. And even in this tailwind, it flips over almost immediately, getting a smooth turn to the right before a nice fade forward for an easy 350 feet. Now, as we've talked about in many different videos, plastic plays a huge role in how a disc flies. So while the Star Wraith is rated at 11.5 -1.3, so is this DX Wraith. And if ours flies anything like Zach's did, well, say it with me, flight numbers don't matter. Okay, let's move on and get to testing some of these other discs. Beginning with another disc made by Innova, but for a different company, it's the Infinite Discs Czar. The Czar is described by Infinite as a more overstable Wraith, though it's rated with the exact same flight numbers of 11.5 -1.3. However, most Innova fans online agree that it's using the old T-Rex mold. which has very different flight numbers of 11404. So let's see just how overstable it is. First up, we have two iBlend Czars. Purple is max weight and a very minimal dome, while the pink one here is 168 grams and very domey. And interestingly, they are a little bit different in the air. The heavier purple Czar flips up from a slight hyzer, slowly drifts right before it fades out, while the pink Czar on a similar hyzer angle doesn't flip up at all. Instead, it rides that hyzer angle, albeit without an aggressive fade, for a nice smooth flight. We also have another pair of Czars, one S-Blend and one Halo S-Blend. Now, iBlend, S-Blend, and Halo S-Blend aren't all that different in feel, but they are different in two important ways: price and stability. iBlend discs usually run around $15 retail, while S-Blend will be pushing $20 to $22, and Halo S-Blend $25 and up. Now remember, these are all made by Innova, so S-Blend is basically Star plastic, Halo S-Blend is Halo Star, but iBlend doesn't have like a direct comparison these days at Innova. It might be comparable to Pro plastic, which would explain why it's a little bit less expensive. But after saying all of that, this particular S-Blend Czar is super understable. On basically the same line and angle as that purple iBlend one we saw, it quickly flips over and even gets over in cut rolls. But rest assured, some things are always true, like Halo plastic being much more overstable. This Halo S-Blend Czar is beef. This, though, I think is a good moment to reflect on. Here we have 4 discs, all the same mold, 3 different plastics, different weights, and very different flight paths. It's obviously another opportunity for me to say flight numbers don't matter, but what I mean by that is do your own research. You need to get out there and test some of these discs and plastics. See if there is a difference for you in a flat disc versus a domey disc. See how much the weight affects the flight path for you. And don't just blindly accept that flight numbers from one manufacturer mean the same thing that they do from another. All right, let's get back in the action now with yet another disc made by Innova for someone else. This time, the Millennium Astra. And again, we have 2 Astras. This time, exactly the same plastic, but different runs and very different profiles. These are both Quantum Metal Flake, which is Innova's champion metal flake plastic. But while the stock Astra here has a nice dome, our custom flight numbers don't matter stamp, available now at sixsideddiscs.com, is board flat. Now, before we throw these, we need to again talk about Innova manufacturing discs for other companies and using mismatched top and bottom molds from their own line of discs. The Astra, according to someone from Team Millennium that we've talked to, is the same mold as the Innova Archon. And it's generally agreed that an Archon is a combination of the Vulcan top mold and the Wraith bottom mold. And the flight numbers are only slightly changed from the Wraith or Czar at 11.5 -1.2. So what will that all mean for how it flies? Well, the flat custom stamped Astra is super overstable, showing no turn at all, and a substantial fade. While the domey stock Astra has maybe one of the best looking flights I've seen in a while. A smooth but subtle turn, and a smooth but moderate fade. That is how you get accurate distance. Now, if you've followed this series, you've probably seen me cook up some complex charts comparing discs to each other, but I feel like this is such a large sample size and the differences are so subtle. So instead, we're going to hand out some superlatives, like you see in your high school yearbooks, to help summarize the difference between some of these discs. So stick around to the end if you want to catch those. Next up, let's move on to Lone Star and one of their best-selling distance drivers, the Nimitz. Sharing the same flight numbers as the Wraith, the Nimitz typically has a slight dome, and we have 2, both in Bravo plastic, and only 1 gram different, at 172 and 173, respectively. The red Nimitz here gets a slight turn before fading out, a very similar flight to that domey Astra. While the blue Nimitz is put on a little bit more hyzer and a little bit higher, so it holds straight rather than turning before fading out. And I think that shows why the Nimitz is one of the best-selling Lone Star discs. 2 discs with almost the same flight numbers are the Discraft Drive and the Latitude 64 Grace. Representing arguably the two best FPO players of the last 10 years, no offense to Katrina Allen, Kristen Tatar's Grace has been flying off the shelf since its release a couple years ago, while 5-time world champion Paige Pierce has had a couple popular releases in her line, including the Fierce and Passion. Today we're comparing two Graces, the Grand Orbit Grace, which got just the faintest of turns before a big fade, and then the Stock Grace, which got a bit more smooth turn and then a reliable fade. And then looking at the new ESP Drive side by side with the Stock Grace, and if that's not the best way to say that the Drive is a viable alternative to the Grace, I don't know what is. Because those flights look almost exactly the same. Next, let's take a look at another 11-speed driver from Discraft, the Surge. Rated at 11.5, -1.3, the Surge was approved back in 2006 and was even discontinued for a while a few years ago before Chandler Fry convinced Discraft to make it his Tour Series disc, right before he moved on to Infinite Discs and ThoughtSpace a year later. Off the tee, the Surge doesn't quite show the -1 turn, but it very much shows that 3 fade, making it one of the most overstable discs that we've tested so far. But it certainly wasn't the most overstable disc we found, and for that, we have to take a look at the 4 discs we have from MVP. Starting with the James Conrad Zenith in plasma plastic. Rated at 11.5, -0.52, the Zenith was the 3rd disc in the James Conrad line, and his first distance driver since joining MVP. And it's no surprise that the Zenith was a priority for the Conrad line, seeing as one of his favorite drivers while he was at Innova was the Wraith. Off the tee, the Zenith holds straight, and straight, and straight, and finally fades out for an excellent straight flight. Compared to the other 11-speed driver from MVP, the Photon, the Zenith might be a slightly more beginner-friendly option. Because even at just 151 grams, this Fission Photon is crazy overstable. Was it the most overstable that we tested? Maybe, but the next disc from MVP wasn't far off either. Although when I say MVP, what I mean is Axiom. The Defy from Axiom is rated at 11.5, -1.53 in fission plastic, but we also have one in neutron plastic rated at 11.5, -1.3. The Fission Defy probably fits in somewhere between the crazy overstability of the Photon and the easygoing Zenith. It thinks about flipping up, but instead goes from slow fade to big fade. But in neutron plastic, even at a measly 159 grams, it's still super overstable. Maybe not quite as much as that Fission Photon, but not far off either. So that has the very overstable side of the spectrum covered pretty thoroughly thanks to MVP. Let's shift gears though and look at some 11-speed drivers that perhaps you haven't heard of. And first up is the XCOM discs Libra. XCOM is a newer manufacturer that we're going to be exploring in depth soon. They're from China, and their origins actually come from Ultimate prior to their entry into the disc golf market. Now though, they have a full line of discs including the Libra, rated at 11.5, -1.2, which of course are just the flight numbers we want to test. But I have to say, that is not the flight that we were expecting. That is way more understable than the flight numbers would suggest. But this got me wondering, XCOM has another 11-speed driver with more understable flight numbers? So what if maybe, well, could it? And wouldn't you know it, flight numbers don't matter strikes again. I had wondered if maybe these discs were stamped incorrectly, but the embossing on the bottom clearly shows that the XCOM Leo is a Leo and the Libra is a Libra, but for whatever reason, their stabilities are sort of flip-flopped. At least when we threw them. I guess we'll have to wait and learn more when we explore XCOM in more detail in a few weeks. But until then, let's move on to another disc featured in an upcoming video, the Discmania S-Line DD1. Oh, no, sorry. This is the Disgo S-Line GD1. That's my mistake. So the S-Line DD1 is an 11.5 -1.2 distance driver from Discmania. The S-Line GD1 is an 11.5 -1.2 distance driver from Disgo. DD obviously stands for distance driver. GD stands for something. Anyways, let's see how the Discmania Disgo S-Line DD1 GD1 flies. And, well, which is which? Because they both fly pretty straight. The GD1 with a slight turn, and the DD1 with a more consistently straight flight, but before they both fade out. Similar discs, similar stamps, similar flights. It's almost like it wasn't an accident at all. Anyways, let's see one more Lone Star driver, the Lone Star Curl. Rated at 11.5 -1.2, the Curl is also one of Lone Star's best sellers, even though it still has very similar flight numbers to the Nimitz. But everything about the Curl is smoother than the Nimitz. Smoother rim, smoother wing, smoother turn, smoother fade. Smooth. Okay, just 5 discs to go, and let's speed it up because this is probably the most discs we've ever compared in one video. So let's take a look at number 5, the Yikun Jun in their new Phoenix Star plastic, which feels like a more premium plastic than their regular Phoenix blend. It's rated at 11.5 -1.2 and almost actually flies like it. Maybe just a little more understable than -1 turn. It does work hard to fight out though. There's some fade in there somewhere. Number 4 and number 3 are essentially the exact same disc. The Thought Space Ethereal Animus and the Mint Discs Sublime Longhorn, with ever so slightly different flight numbers of 11.502 for the Animus and 11.4 -1 2.5 for the Longhorn. They look and feel nearly identical. Both are manufactured by MVP, both are in their respective versions of plasma plastic, and both are overstable. No turn, no flip. And let's finish with our last 2 discs, something completely different and differenter. The Prodigy Air Spectrum H3V2 and the Viking Ragnarok. Now you might not think that these 2 discs have a whole lot in common. The wing design is very different from the Ragnarok to the H3V2, but our history with Viking discs tells us that these flight numbers may not be telling the whole story. And my personal experience with the H3V2 tells us that this could be a big turning showdown. So let's see which one turns best. The H3V2 flips up from hyzer, quickly turns over, and swoops out before finding some late low-speed fade. While the Viking Ragnarok gets up, gets turning, and never ever stops. So that puts an end to our list on a pretty understable note. Let's hand out some well-deserved superlatives to some of these discs. The most likely to succeed, for beginners, is the Viking Ragnarok. We were very impressed with its turn, which will make it a great Wraith-style driver for lower arm speeds. Most likely to succeed, for power throwers, the Halo S-Blend Czar. Or probably like the latest Halo Wraith on the market, those take forever to beat in. Most likely to tell your joke, again, right after you did, but slightly louder and not as funny, the Disgo GD1, for reasons. The most likely to ruin a vegan's birthday party, well, that's got to be the beefcake that is the MVP Fission Photon. Most likely to turn right when you say go left, it's the XCOM Libra. Most attractive stamp has to go to the XCOM Leo, even though it wasn't supposed to be part of this test in the first place. Most attractive full color print has to go to the Disc Golf Swag Wraith, for obvious reasons. And finally, most likely to surprise you in the best way possible, the Lone Star Curl. Going into this comparison, I never would have guessed that the Lone Star Curl would be one of the best 11-speed drivers, but it was just so smooth. And before we end, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone that came out to Idlewild. We had a fantastic time. We gave away all 100 Velcro patches, and you all were super gracious. We really appreciate that. We signed autographs, which is kind of crazy, took pictures, shook hands, and just had a wonderful time. So if you could make it, I hope you had a great time. And if you couldn't, thanks for your kind messages. Anyways, it means a lot to have all of your support. What's your favorite 11-speed Wraith-like driver? Leave a comment down below. And also comment below what flight numbers we should explore next. For Six-Sided Discs, I'm Greg. We'll see you in the next one. There's no denying its greatness, but there was a short time, from 2005 to 2007, and we have 3 different Wraiths to compare to that. While the pink Czar on a... Next up, though, let's compare a disc... and if that's not... But it certainly wasn't the most overstable disc we found. For that, we're going to have to take a look at our MVP discs. If you like this content and want to see more, please consider liking the video, subscribing to our channel, or supporting us on Patreon. Your support makes this content possible.